Hey there, and welcome to Tales by June, where hearts break, heal, and sometimes seek revenge. Let's begin today's story.
Hey, before we begin, let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more. I always believed that if I sang hard enough, if I stood in the center of a stage with my voice pouring out like a confession, the world would have no choice but to see me. Since I was a little girl in Ohio, standing in the living room with a hairbrush for a microphone, I knew Broadway was where I belonged. The lights, the velvet curtains, the kind of applause that shakes your chest. It was the life I wanted. When I was 18, I packed 2 suitcases and took a bus to New York City. My parents were nervous but proud. My mom pressed $50 bills into my hand with a whispered prayer. My dad, usually quiet, told me, "Don't ever let anyone dim your shine." The city was cruel at first. My apartment was a shoebox with walls so thin I could hear my neighbor's alarm clock before it buzzed. I worked shifts at a cafe, served coffee to people rushing off to their real jobs. But every night, after washing the smell of burnt espresso off my clothes, I auditioned. Lines out the door, girls in heels higher than their hopes, scripts clutched like life rafts. Sometimes I got a call back. Mostly, I got rejection, but rejection never scared me. Loneliness did. I told myself the city would feel less heavy once I found someone to share it with. And then, he walked into my life. It was a Thursday afternoon at the cafe. Rain smeared the glass windows, and I was humming under my breath while wiping down tables. He came in, shaking water from his dark hair, his smile so easy it was almost arrogant. "Large black coffee, no sugar," he said. His voice carried, deep and certain, like a man who knew the world bent toward him. I didn't know his name yet, but I noticed the way his eyes lingered on me, the way he didn't look past me like most customers did. He asked, "Do you sing? Your voice, it sounds like you do." I froze. How could he know? I nodded, embarrassed. He grinned. "Then maybe one day I'll buy tickets to see you on stage." I laughed it off. But that night, in my tiny room with the leaking faucet, I caught myself replaying his words. That was the beginning. I didn't know then that the man who made me feel seen would one day make me invisible. I didn't know that the same smile that warmed me would later break me. Back then, all I knew was that my dream was Broadway, and maybe, just maybe, he was going to be part of that dream. His name was Daniel. I learned it the following week when he came back to the cafe, raincoat dripping, same order on his lips. "Large black coffee, no sugar," he said, then leaned against the counter with a crooked smile. "And maybe your name if you're giving that out today." I told him, "Maya." He repeated it like it was a melody he wanted to memorize. Soon, the cafe wasn't just a job anymore. It was a stage where our story began. He'd stop by almost every day, asking about my auditions, listening when I complained about blisters on my feet or directors who barely looked at me. He laughed at my sarcasm, admired my stubbornness. Daniel wasn't just charming, he was magnetic. He worked in finance, a world of numbers and late-night meetings I didn't understand. But he carried himself like someone who already had everything, and maybe that was why I felt safe leaning into him. He started walking me home after shifts, holding my umbrella even when it meant he got wet. He memorized my coffee order. He learned my schedule. We didn't fall in love all at once. It was slower, quieter, like pages turning in a book you don't realize you're devouring until you've reached the middle. One night, after an audition that ended with me forgotten in a line of 20 other brunettes, I found him waiting outside the theater. "Thought you could use dinner," he said, holding up takeout bags. We ate on the steps, cold sesame noodles and laughter keeping us warm. Then, in the middle of a story about my disastrous high school play, he kissed me. Quick, soft, but steady, like a promise. From then on, he was my person. When I doubted myself, Daniel told me I had more talent than the entire city. When rent was late, he covered it, brushing off my protests. When I said I wanted to give up, he told me not to. "You're going to make it, Maya," he'd whisper, pulling me close at night. "And when you do, I'll be in the front row." I believed him. Maybe that's why, when his world grew busier and mine stayed small, I didn't notice the cracks. At first, it was little things. Canceling dinner, rescheduling dates. I told myself he was ambitious like me. That success took time, and sacrifice. I didn't yet know that sacrifices could cost more than you expected. Back then, all I saw was a man who made me believe in forever, and I gave him everything a girl with Broadway dreams could give. My heart, my trust, my time. I thought love was enough. I thought he was enough. Daniel and I became inseparable. My friends from auditions started teasing me, saying I was glowing. Maybe I was. When he was near, the city felt softer, kinder. We built a rhythm together. Morning coffees, evenings tangled on the couch in his apartment that overlooked the East River. He wanted me there more often, until eventually it wasn't his place anymore. It was ours. That was when the little choices began. An audition would come up, but Daniel would say, "Come to dinner with my colleagues instead. It's important they meet you." I'd tell myself it was just one audition, that another would come. I wanted to be supportive, to stand beside him the way he stood beside me. When a touring company offered me a small role out of state, Daniel asked me to stay. "Long distance is messy," he said, his hand warm over mine. "We're building something real here, Maya. You don't need to chase every opportunity. The right one will come, and I'll be here when it does." I wanted to believe that, so I turned the offer down. Weeks turned into months. My life became less about auditions and more about being Daniel's partner. I still sang in the shower, still hummed under my breath while cooking, but the stage, my stage, grew further away. Sometimes, late at night, I'd feel it. A pang, like an empty seat waiting for me in a darkened theater. But then Daniel would kiss me goodnight, and I'd convince myself love was worth more than applause. One evening, as we were curled up watching a movie, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "You know, I see us forever, Maya. Marriage, maybe kids someday. You'd be the heart of it all." I melted. The idea of forever with him felt like a new kind of dream, one that glowed even brighter than Broadway. I didn't notice that forever came with conditions, because soon when I mentioned auditioning again, he sighed. "Do you really want to put yourself through all that rejection? You're happier here, with me, aren't you?" And I'd nod, because I wanted to keep the peace. I wanted to keep him. I didn't see it then, but I was slowly trading curtain calls for candlelit dinners, applause for his approval. Every yes to him was another no to myself. I told myself this was what love required. That sacrifice was proof of devotion. That maybe I didn't need Broadway if I had Daniel. But deep down, under the layers of compromise, my heart still ached for the stage. And though I buried that ache, I couldn't kill it. Dreams don't die quietly, they wait. By the second year of our relationship, Broadway felt like a past life. My headshots sat in a drawer. My dance shoes gathered dust in the closet. Whenever friends called to tell me about auditions, I'd politely decline. "I'm busy," I'd say, though what I really meant was, I don't want to disappoint him. Daniel's career was climbing. Promotions, meetings, invitations to galas. I became his shadow. Dressed in borrowed confidence and cocktail dresses. People whispered about how lucky he was to have me at his side. I smiled, even when I felt like an accessory more than a partner. At first, Daniel was attentive. Kisses on the forehead before work, texts that made my heart skip. But slowly, something shifted. He started coming home later. "Meetings ran long," he'd mutter, loosening his tie. I'd wait up for him, dinner gone cold on the table. Some nights he didn't come home at all, sending quick messages. Staying downtown, too tired to drive back. I told myself it was temporary, that he was stressed, that love ebbs and flows. Still, the silences between us grew louder. I remember one evening vividly. I had cooked his favorite, lemon pasta with shrimp. I lit candles, put on the record player, tried to make the night special. When he walked in, his face was blank. "You didn't have to do all this," he said, shrugging off his coat. His phone buzzed, and instead of sitting down with me, he answered it, pacing the kitchen while I stared at the flickering candles. I felt invisible. When I reached for him later, he turned, distracted. "I'm exhausted, Maya. Can we not tonight?" His rejection stung more than I wanted to admit. The man who once cheered for my every note now barely noticed when I sang at all. The man who promised forever felt like a stranger sleeping beside me. Still, I clung to him. I reminded myself of the early days, of the way he believed in me, of the warmth of his smile. Surely this was just a rough patch. All couples have them. But sometimes at night, lying awake while he scrolled through his phone, I felt the truth pressing against my chest. Forever was starting to slip through my fingers, and I didn't know how to stop it. The first time I noticed something was truly wrong, it was small, almost invisible. Daniel had always kept his phone face up on the counter. Now he placed it face down. When it buzzed, he'd grab it quickly, thumb moving fast, eyes darting. I told myself not to be paranoid. Love, I thought, meant trust, but doubt has a way of sneaking in, sharp and quiet. One evening, I asked if he wanted to see a play with me. A small off-Broadway show, nothing flashy, just something to remind me of who I used to be. He sighed, not even looking up from his phone. Maya, those things are a waste of time. Why do you still care about that world? I swallowed hard. Because it used to be my dream. Dreams change, he said flatly. Then his phone buzzed again, and he walked out of the room. I sat there in the silence, feeling something inside me splinter. Not long after, whispers began. Friends who still auditioned would drop hints. I thought I saw Daniel at the theater the other night, but he wasn't alone. I laughed it off, pretended it didn't sting, but the seed of suspicion was planted. One night, when he said he had another late meeting, I found myself walking the streets, restless. I ended up near the theater district, neon lights painting the night sky. That's when I saw it. A poster for a brand new Broadway musical. And there, in bold letters, was the name of the rising star everyone was talking about. Lila Hart. She was dazzling, even in print. Red lips, golden hair, a smile that promised temptation. I stared at the poster, my stomach twisting. I didn't know why I felt drawn to it, why something deep inside me whispered her name like a warning. 2 weeks later, the truth began to leak. Not to me at first, but to the world. Tabloids ran photos of Daniel at late-night parties, always near Leela. Headlines speculated about their friendship. Rumors spread like fire, each one scorching me even though I pretended not to read them. At home, I asked him outright, "Are you seeing her?" He froze, his jaw tightening. "Maya, don't be ridiculous." But his eyes didn't meet mine. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. Because if I admitted it was true, then everything I gave up, every audition, every dream, every part of myself I traded, would feel like ashes in my hands. So I smiled tightly and said nothing more. But the city was already watching, and the truth had a way of breaking through, louder than any song I had ever sung. The day my world split open began like any other. I made coffee. I scrolled half-heartedly through emails. Daniel left early with a rushed kiss on the cheek. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. "Maya, are you okay?" "Don't look at the news." "Call me as soon as you can." My stomach twisted as I opened the first link. There they were, Daniel and Lila, caught in the harsh glare of paparazzi cameras. Her hand tucked possessively in his. His smile, the same one that once belonged to me, now shining for the world beside her. The headline screamed, "Broadway's Golden Girl and Wall Street's Prince. A secret romance?" The photos were undeniable. Late-night dinners. His hand at the small of her back. Lips far too close to be innocent. My chest felt hollow. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. Everyone could see what I had been denying. My name trailed in the articles like an afterthought. His longtime girlfriend, Maya Bennett, could not be reached for comment. Suddenly, I wasn't just a woman in love. I was a spectacle. When Daniel came home that night, I was waiting. The apartment was dim, the only light spilling from the kitchen lamp. My hands shook as I held up the magazine. "Explain this." He didn't flinch. He didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he sighed, as if I were the one exhausting him. "Maya, you don't understand. Lila and I, things just happened. Things just happened." My voice cracked, tears burning hot. "You promised me forever." His eyes softened for a moment, but there was no real regret there, just pity. "You gave up Broadway for me. I never asked you to. Maybe you weren't meant for that world." The words sliced deeper than the betrayal itself. Because they weren't true. I was meant for that world. I had only let him convince me otherwise. I stood there, shaking, staring at the man I had loved, realizing I didn't recognize him anymore. "You ruined me," I whispered, "and I let you." I didn't pack that night. I didn't scream or throw things. Instead, I slipped out the next morning while he was still asleep. One suitcase, one broken heart, no plan. New York felt colder than ever as I walked away. The tabloids followed me, strangers whispered, headlines painted me as the betrayed woman left behind. But beneath the shame, beneath the grief, something else stirred. A voice I thought I'd silenced whispered, You gave up everything once. Don't let this be the end of you. For the first time in years, I listened. I left New York without saying goodbye. No press statement, no explanation, just silence. I took a train north, then another, until the city skyline vanished. I ended up in a quiet coastal town in Maine, a place where no one cared about Broadway or Wall Street or tabloid scandals. People there only cared about the tides, the weather, and whether the fishermen had a good catch that morning. I rented a tiny cottage with peeling paint and a crooked porch. At first, I felt like a ghost inhabiting someone else's life. I spent hours staring at the ocean, numb, waiting for the hurt to ease. Days bled into weeks. My phone buzzed with calls from reporters, from friends, even from Daniel, but I ignored them all. Slowly, the noise died down. The world moved on. I was no longer a headline. In the quiet, I started to remember myself. I sang again, not for an audience, but for the gulls circling above the waves. My voice cracked at first, rusty, but it didn't matter. For the first time in years, I was singing for me. I took odd jobs to pay rent, waiting tables at a diner, painting houses, even teaching a local kids' choir on Saturdays. The children reminded me of why I'd fallen in love with performing in the first place. Their joy was pure, untouched by ambition or fear. One afternoon, the choir director asked me to sing with the kids during rehearsal. When I did, the room fell still. Parents peeked through the doorway, strangers wandered in off the street. When I finished, someone whispered, "You belong on a stage." The words pierced me, awakening something I thought I'd buried. For 2 years, I rebuilt, not just my voice, but my spirit. I read books. I wrote music. I allowed myself to dream again. Not for love, not for anyone else, but for me. When I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw the broken woman who had walked away from New York. I saw someone stronger, someone who had been burned but refused to turn to ash. And then, one spring morning as the ocean shimmered silver, I knew. It was time to go back. Not for Daniel, not to prove anything to the tabloids, but because the stage was calling me home. I packed my suitcase. This time it wasn't running away. This time it was coming back. New York looked different when I returned. The skyline was the same, but I wasn't the same. The streets that once felt suffocating now felt like familiar paths calling me home. I walked past Broadway theaters and neon marquees with a strange mixture of nostalgia and determination. The tabloids had long forgotten me, but the theater community hadn't. Whispers followed me everywhere. Maya Bennett? Isn't she the one Daniel cheated on? She gave up Broadway for him? I smiled politely. Let them talk. I didn't need their pity. I needed my stage. I auditioned for a new musical that had been the talk of the city, one of Daniel's rivals' productions. I walked into the theater with my chest lifted, ignoring the faint hum of recognition in the room. Casting directors, choreographers, dancers, they all knew my story. But I wasn't the broken girl anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with. The auditions were grueling. Hours of singing, dancing, and acting in front of a panel who didn't care about my past, only my present. I felt my old nerves bubble up, but this time they were tempered with steel. I wasn't auditioning to be loved. I was auditioning to be seen. One day, during a particularly exhausting rehearsal, the choreographer called me aside. "Maya," she said, her eyes bright, "you have something no one else does. That raw, undeniable presence. Don't lose it." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. It was true. All the heartbreak, all the nights alone by the ocean, all the pain, it had given me depth. And on stage, depth was power. Finally, after weeks of auditions, callbacks, and endless rehearsals, I got the call. "You've been cast as the lead." I could barely breathe. I ran to the nearest mirror and looked at myself. The reflection staring back was unrecognizable, strong, radiant, fearless. Opening night arrived. Backstage, I could hear the audience murmuring, waiting for the first notes. I stretched, whispered lines to myself, and closed my eyes. This was my moment. Not Daniel's. Not the tabloids. Mine. When the curtain rose, I felt a thrill I hadn't felt in years. The lights were warm on my face, the orchestra humming under my skin. Every note I sang carried years of pain, growth, and triumph. Every movement told a story that only I could tell. After the first act, applause rolled through the theater, crashing against me like waves. I smiled, letting it wash over me. I was alive. I was powerful. I was back. And somewhere in the audience, I knew Daniel was watching. I didn't need to look to know he'd bought tickets. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had once destroyed me was now witnessing the woman he had underestimated rise from the ashes stronger than ever. Backstage, after the final bow, my fellow cast members cheered, patting me on the back, celebrating the lead they had fought to cast. I laughed, tears slipping down my cheeks. I had reclaimed my life, my voice, my dreams. And for the first time in years, I wasn't looking for love. I was looking at the reflection of someone who had survived and thrived. The stage had given me my power back, and nothing, not even Daniel, could take it away. 2 years after my silent return to New York, my life had transformed in ways I hadn't dared imagine. The city that once swallowed me whole now reflected my hard-earned triumphs. I had my own apartment at first, a loft above a bustling street in the theater district, but ambition had taken me further. Now, I lived in a sprawling Manhattan townhouse with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the skyline at sunset. My parents had moved in with me. Their rooms overlooked Central Park. Mom cooked breakfast every morning, humming tunes she'd never dared sing aloud in Ohio. Dad read in the sunlit library, occasionally glancing at me with the pride that words could never fully convey. I still remembered the girl who had walked away from Broadway, the one who had sat in a Maine cottage staring at the sea, wondering if she'd ever sing again. That girl was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone fearless. My calendar was full. Rehearsals, interviews, charity events, but I moved through it all with a calm authority I had never possessed before. The media loved a comeback story, and yes, my past was a topic of fascination. One morning during a televised interview, a reporter leaned forward, eyes glinting. "So, Maya," she said, voice sweet but sharp. "Many people wonder, how did you overcome the heartbreak? Did Daniel's betrayal motivate you or haunt you?" I smiled, tilting my head slightly. My voice was smooth, measured. "Well," I said, "I think Heartbreak is a bit like Broadway, terrifying at first, exhausting, full of drama, and ultimately, an amazing teacher. And as for Daniel, he taught me one thing: never settle for anything less than what I deserve." The reporter blinked, caught off guard. I let the pause linger, a polite, deadly silence before adding, with a slight upward arch of my eyebrow, "And the world? Well, the world loves a comeback. I prefer a mic drop." Cut to commercial. I laughed quietly afterward, sipping tea because it felt good. It felt like control. Tickets for my upcoming musical had sold out weeks in advance. Fans lined up around the block, and social media was buzzing. The show had become the hottest ticket in town, the one everyone wanted to see. And me? I was ready. Opening night arrived. The theater was packed. Lights shimmered, the orchestra played, and when the curtain rose, I stepped onto the stage with confidence that had been hard-earned. Each song, each movement, each note carried years of pain, resilience, and growth. Applause washed over me again and again, each ovation fueling the fire that had been rekindled inside me long ago. And then, backstage, just before the final act, he appeared. Daniel. He wasn't sneaky this time. He had bought a ticket weeks ago, no doubt hoping to see the girl he thought he'd broken. Now he stood at the doorway of my makeup room, eyes wide, lips parted, the man who had once been my everything reduced to a gawking stranger. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak at first. I let him take in the sight of me, the lead of the hottest musical on Broadway, poised, radiant, untouchable. He stammered, words failing him. I set down my brush and looked him straight in the eyes. My voice was steady, low, but every syllable struck like a drumbeat. "You thought you could destroy me. You thought stealing my heart and feeding me lies would make me smaller. Look at me, Daniel. I am everything you are not." His face went pale. I leaned slightly closer, letting the intensity of my gaze land like a warning. "You cheated, humiliated me, and thought I'd crumble. But I didn't. I rose. I built a life, a career, a home, and yes, a stage where I belong. You? You have nothing that I didn't already give you. And even that, I took back." His throat tightened, and I saw it, genuine, unguarded regret. I smiled faintly, a mix of sorrow and triumph. "I hope one day you understand. I am not the girl who waited for your approval. I am not the girl you lost. I am Maya Bennett, and I am standing taller than you ever imagined." He opened his mouth to speak, but I shook my head ever so slightly, my gaze unwavering. "Save your excuses. Your chance is gone." And just like that, he left. Not with words, not with apologies, just silence. When the curtain fell that night, the audience rose in a standing ovation that shook the walls. I took my bow, feeling every single one of those claps echo inside me. Tears pricked my eyes, not of sadness, but of triumph. I had been broken, yes, but I had rebuilt myself into someone unstoppable. Later, in my mansion, I sat with my parents in the sunroom. Mom poured wine. Dad leaned back, smiling quietly. "You did it, Maya," he said. "All of it." I nodded, looking out over the city. The skyline sparkled like a promise, the streets full of stories waiting to be told. I had my dreams, my voice, my life, and for the first time in forever, I didn't just exist. I flourished. Daniel was a chapter, not my story. I was the author now, and I'd written a masterpiece. Standing tall never felt so good.